Alright, we're not going to be too long today. I just wanted to give everybody an update on where we're at on the 4150. And sorry if I sound funny, I'm sucking on a mint. So, zero luck whatsoever with any sort of reproduction wire harness. Can't get them through Agco. Brillman doesn't have them. Nobody's got them. You can get one for a 4270 of all things, but not for a 150. And I can have somebody like Brillman make one, but I have to call Floyd County Museum, see if they have the blueprint for the harness, send Brillman or whoever the blueprint for the harness, and then they turn around and make it, and then you got whatever they're going to charge to have it done, and they're not going to be able to do like these plugs and stuff. Actually, the plugs that plug into here might be not too hard to come by. Maybe. I don't know if that's a standard pattern for those or not, but anyway, they're not gonna have like this or anything like that. So, plus you're getting out there into a timeline of weeks to get it done, not days. And I kind of need it done in days because it can't sit here in the yard forever. So, this is a good harness out of my parts cab that I took out yesterday. And I'm wondering if this was an issue on the 4150 or 4150/4180, because this one, the cab that I have is off of a 180. Because this wire got hot at some point. It didn't melt the whole thing. It's just right here where it goes through the firewall, but it did get hot. But that's okay because we're changing something here at the plug anyway. So this wire is going to get cut off. The bad spot's going to get cut off, and I'm going to have to strip a little bit of the wire loom back so I got more room to work. But so we'll come to that in a minute. This is the plug that was on this harness. It was brittle from being sun baked, so I took the harness that came out of the 150 apart and put it in here. So, or on here. So that harness, other than what the changes I got to make here, and there's a couple wires out here that need a little bit of attention. That one there's got a little burnt. That one there's got some jacket missing. So there's a few wires out here. If I get some splices to get rid of some bad spots, but overall this harness is very usable. As for the long harness, that's the junk harness. Although I do need to, for some reason that 180 cab didn't have this jumper wire that went from the warning buzzer to, I think this goes to the ignition switch. Stop buzzer to ignition post, yes. So I got to take that wire off of there when the time comes. This harness was a nightmare. This thing is so screwed up, it's not even funny. That's the other harness that we got to save. That's all screwed up. There's a bunch of splices up in here. This whole alternator part of the harness is one big splice from here all the way to here. Actually, it's two splices. It's spliced here and it's spliced there. And there's 3 different color wires on every splice. So, like this one goes from red to yellow to back to red. This one goes from white to blue to brown. This one goes from blue to orange. Like, why? And then up here you had 3 wires that were just cut off going to nowhere. 2 of them actually were supposed to go up to the AC pump. Or were 3 of them supposed to go up to the AC pump? No, 2 of them are supposed to go to the AC pump. This one goes to the air cleaner plug switch. And this one is supposed to go to the fuel shutoff solenoid, which that's got a its own separate jumper wire running to it, which now that once I get this harness made, we're going to get rid of that jumper wire so that it's actually correct. And then these two were still going where they were supposed to go. But I spent better part of, once I got that out of the cab yesterday, which I was really careful to label every single wire, what it came off of and where it goes to make it easy to put back together. So that took a hot minute. And then once I got that out of there, I had to, because all of the naturally, 50-year-old wiring harness, most of the wires have faded to different shades of white or yellow, so you don't know what ends up where. So I had to map out this entire plug right here, and then once I knew that, I could use this map to map out these two plugs, or that plug, this plug, and then these three wires, to know what wires are supposed to go where on this, so that I could figure all that out, and track down wire colors so that I knew what color wires I needed to get to make the harness correct. So it was a better part of a 5-hour project yesterday, between getting that out of the cab and taking a multimeter and doing a continuity test and tracking wires down and going through all the color changes and figured out what goes where and sorting that out against the wiring diagram and the operator's manual and then what they had to do dumb stuff like this. There's actually a really good wiring diagram in this operator's manual. And the wiring on this tractor is actually pretty simple. There's really only two circuits. There's the engine circuit and the cab circuit. Let me get back here. Let me get to it for you. And they did a really good job. Every wire is labeled a color: yellow, white, pink, violet, dark blue, yada yada yada. And then you come over here to this wire coming off of the alternator. You got orange, which is the heavy wire that smoked. You got a red wire that's a lighter gauge wire that actually comes up here to the starter motor and then goes back and yada yada yada. It's got a couple splices in it. And then you have this wire here that is just labeled resistance wire. Does not give you a color and does not tell you where it goes once it gets back here to the plug at the cab firewall. So that took a minute to figure out, and basically what it is, there is this dark blue wire coming off of the accessory lug on the back of the ignition switch that comes into this harness and comes up here, and then it just goes to blue. It no longer ceases to be dark blue, and it just becomes blue. And then that disappears into this harness and never comes out on this other end. So it took some tracing to figure it out, to make sure that there wasn't some sort of goofy splice or having a wire that comes out or goes into the harness and then comes back out in a different spot or whatever. So that blue wire hooks up to a brown wire in this harness, and then it's a brown wire up here to this resistance wire. So guess what I'm going to do when I remake the harness? It's going to be blue all the way from the ignition switch up here to the alternator, and I'm putting a blue wire in this one as that resistance wire, so that it makes sense when you're actually trying to work on it. It would have been a whole lot easier if they had just given you a color there instead of resistance wire, but that's what they do. And it's not even technically a resistance wire, it's a load wire. And they're using the signal the load signal off of the accessory lug on the ignition switch to tell the alternator how much to charge. So it took me a while to get all my wire colors figured out as far as what I needed. And then I was hoping, because right down the road here, there's a 4150 parts tractor sitting at a farm. And I swung down there to see if they would let me steal an engine wiring harness off of it if it was in good shape, which it has a wiring harness on it that is in decent shape. Problem is, my 4150 is a 1974. That 4150 is 1977, and there's a serial number break in the engine wiring harness, and as near as I can tell by looking at that harness down there versus my harness, they eliminated like 2 wires, or at least 2 wires, if not 3. You can't really tell without stretching it out like I did here. So they eliminated some wires, and without a wiring diagram for a later model tractor, because my manual is a 74, so luckily it matches my tractor. Without the later model manual to know what wires got eliminated and where things changed, can't really do a whole lot with it. So we're down to making the engine half of the harness. So I started getting, actually I ordered the vast majority of the stuff online last night, and it should be here Thursday. And then some of the more run-of-the-mill stuff I picked up at the auto parts store today. We got 2 different sizes of wire looms, so I got the stuff to come out of the cab, and then this will go past the starter once we lose some wires. All my connectors I need. And then as far as protecting the tractor so that this doesn't happen again, those heavy 10 gauge wires are each getting a 30 amp circuit breaker on the firewall, which is the change that I'm going to make here. Basically, I got to strip this back enough that I can strip this and get a butt splice in it. And we're going to take each of these wires, and I'll have a circuit breaker mounted here and a circuit breaker mounted here on either side of the plug. We'll come out of here with, in this case, a red wire. Take the red wire down, put a lug on it, lug into the circuit breaker, come to the other side, come out of the circuit breaker, crimp this tab on the wire coming out of the circuit breaker and plug it back into the plug, so that you'll have a loop right here with the circuit going into the circuit breaker and then back into the main harness. And then that should prevent this from ever happening again. I was going to put fuses in it, and I called Dad while I was at the auto parts store to see what he thought I would need for an amp rated fuse, and he's like, well, why don't you put circuit breakers in it, that way you don't have to worry about carrying fuses all the time in the tractor. And it's like, okay, there should be enough room back there to mount them somewhere on the firewall on either side of this plug, and like I said, don't have to worry about carrying fuses. When the load goes away, the circuit breaker resets itself. So that's the plan as far as that goes. So, but as you can see, every one of these wires is supposed to be a different color, but you got a bright shade of white and a dark shade of white and a shade of yellow and a couple different shades of white, and that pink kind of faded to white if you're not paying attention. So like half the wires in this are faded to different shades of white. So it took a minute to, well, this one was easy because I just labeled them as I took them off stuff in the dash, but that harness was a little more difficult because I didn't think about marking it when I took it apart. So if you're gonna completely pull a wiring harness off of a tractor, of course it would have only done me half good because half the wires were cut and went to nowhere anyhow. So, but everything's mapped out, labeled. I got 10, what was there, 10, there's 15 wires in this harness, but some of them never leave the cab, like these two come out here and then come down here and hook into some plugs at the firewall. So there's 15 wires in that, and if I remember right, there's 10 wires in the big one, each of them a different color. So I got 10 different colors of wire coming. I had to get this big 1/2-inch ring terminal because I couldn't find one at the store. That's coming from online. I had to get these Delphi connectors, both males and females. to go back into these plugs. So all that stuff's coming from online. It should be here Thursday. So this is probably going to be this weekend project, because naturally once this happens, everything has to hit all at once. My rims for my grain truck should be ready hopefully tomorrow. So then those have to go down to get tires put on them. Friday, my wheat seed is going to be ready, so I got to go pick that up Friday after work and get it back here and get it put in the wagon so that it's on wheels. When my tires get back, the grain truck's got to get worked on. This has to get done. Next week, we should be able to start cutting beans ever so slowly, hopefully, fingers crossed. So, like I say, this was not a project I wanted to have to work on right now, because there's like everything slamming all at once right here once that happens. So, and there's not a whole lot that I can do on it today to show you, because I don't have any of the stuff that I need, and I don't want to put this back in until I do the modifications to it, because it's going to be a whole lot easier to do it here on the bench than it's going to be to do it in the dash. But that being said, put this over here. We can get the circuit breakers mounted today, so that at least that part is done. So, let me have a look, see where we can get it mounted, and we will get that out of the way. Alright, let me get situated down in here. Cab tractors are great until you gotta work on them. But I don't know if you can kind of see it. You can see my pencil marks there. I got a layout on either side there, and obviously that's in a spot where you can't really get in with a hammer and a punch to swing it. So we got this fancy little tool here that you just put it where you want your hole to be. I need to do it with my other hand. I'm gonna have to set you. There ain't no place to set you. This is not a good position to be in, even for a skinny guy like me. You're a son of a bitch. Okay, see if I can do this getting upright. So you just take it on your mark like so. And that'll put you enough of a mark to use a drill. And now with the use of our little mini right angle drill, which I can kind of run if I reach over the dash. That stuff's thicker than I thought. This is not fun. Hopefully that's in the right spot, because I was drilling it blind so I could get both hands on it. It looks okay. Tell you what, this little right angle drill is handy, but the ergonomics of it suck for trying to run it one-handed. All right, and there we go. Those should, I mean, nothing's gonna completely eliminate the potential for this to happen again, because it's electricity and nothing's ever a guarantee with electricity, but having those there should greatly reduce the chances of something like this ever happening again. So, but for right now, that's about all the further I can go until the rest of my stuff shows up, so that I can start doing actual wire changing and whatnot. So anyhow, I think tomorrow I'm going to work on, or go over the corn head, so that that's done. It'll be one more project off the table, and then Thursday, I'm going to say hopefully my stuff shows up for this, and we can at least start working on wiring and maybe get the cab buttoned up Thursday. But we'll have to see how things play out. So anyhow, I guess that's it for this one. We'll catch you guys on the next one.